Hi everyone, this is Kelly with The Truth in Story, and today I'm going to be looking at a very sweet deck that I am quite happy about, and I have been delayed in doing this, but this is a deck that I saw my friend Itzy has the, I believe it's the Il Menigalo version of this, which the original deck is the Naibi Vacchetta, by Naibi Vacchetta from 1893. However, the Lo Scarabeo version has recolored it by Michela Gaudenzi. I'm sure I may be saying that incorrectly, but it's a beautiful recoloring of this. The original is much bolder, and this is much softer, kind of watercolor feel to it. But other than that, it's just been recolored, and I think that actually they did a beautiful job with it. And I was really excited to be able to pick this particular deck up because we are still in March of the Pips for a little bit. I have done horrible with my dailies, but I've been greatly enjoyed watching everybody else's. And this is an interesting pip deck because, or Marseille style, I wouldn't even really call this Marseille style. It is a beautiful historical deck that deviates quite away from the Marseille style of pips. This is, again, was 1893, so this was prior 1900s when, of course, we had more scenic pips. But there is quite a lot of scenery going on in these pips. And so that's what to me is so fascinating, not to mention it's just beautiful. So this is definitely in the top 4 of my historical decks that I personally love to use. Oh, I think I just pulled one out of order. Let's see. Hopefully that's the bottom. Yep. Now I have already trimmed this. I put I think I have a video clip, hopefully I kept it, but I think I have a video clip of it before trimming it, how I tested this one. But you can see that what I did was I trimmed to the card itself because there is a green border here. I hope I didn't delete the footage. I'm pretty sure you've already seen this, but I'm just doing this in case I did not, in case I accidentally deleted it. There is a bright, not bright, but this color green. It's just like this pretty much with all of the text down here. This, I cut it down. Thankfully, they left the original titles on the card, so I went ahead and trimmed it all off and just kept the original titles, and that worked out really beautifully. I used my smallest corner round. I could have kept it straight. I kind of thought I probably should have just kept it straight corners. As you will see, most traditional tarot decks do keep those sharp corners here. And you can see it's about the size of my Neoclassico. Just it's a little bit taller and a hair wider, but barely any wider. So it's quite small, but it is very similar to this, which is one of my absolute favorite decks, historical decks. So I'm really actually happy. The backing, of course, that does not make it a balanced backing, but that doesn't matter to me because I don't ever lay my cards face down. My cards are always laid face up anyways. So so I've already trimmed that off so that you were seeing what we originally would have seen before Lo Scarabeo put that on there. And again, that's what the back would have looked like before I trimmed it off. And I think that one I just used to test. These are just some of their other decks, and I was just using it to test where I was going to need to trim. So that's that. Let me put that away. Just a typical tuck box. You know, this wasn't expensive. It is nice. It's sturdy. It holds its shape well. If it's going to be a tuck box, I do like these sturdy ones that hold their shape really nicely. And Lo Scarabeo generally does that. It comes with the typical little white book in multiple languages, which means that only, I believe it's 14 pages, 13, yeah, 14 pages are in English. But again, I don't, that's fine. But I will say this here. So it does, again, talk about the historical, you know, why they're kind of going through and doing historical tarot. They talk about here... the original deck by Giovanni Vacchetta constitutes a very important moment in the history of tarot, even though it had an extremely localized distribution in northern Italy and was not linked, at least not apparently, with any esoteric discipline. This deck demonstrates how the idea and need to introduce allegorical development into the minor arcana did not come about in 1910 with the work by Pamela Colin Smith and Arthur Edward Waite. We already know that. It was already in the Solabusca, which was in the 1400s. But, be that as it may, but was actually prior to this and consistent with the time. Furthermore, the Naibi, the original name of the cards, show the unhidden side of the tarot. This deals, in fact, with cards designed and created with artistic, aesthetic, and symbolic purposes. Comparing those cards now with the cartomantic methods and diagrams brings about interesting insights and expands the reader's perception. In the new version, the original work was colored so that it could be brought closer to the modern tastes and perceptions. Michaela Gadenza, who was called upon to do this job, chose soft and delicate colors so that they would not smother the precious lines, but rather enhance the shapes through colorful area. And then it talks about the master, which is Giovanni Vacchetta, who was born in Cuneo in 1863 and passed away in 1940, and talks about him a little bit. They decided to rename it to Tarot of the Master just to break away from the original version and yet still pay tribute to him as a master. She did a little brief talking about cartomancy, and then it goes right in. And I will say, it does not so much give you description or meanings of the cards, but it actually talks about the card itself, and I quite like that. And so I'll talk about that a little bit as we go through, because it's really interesting because it talks about the images, because that, especially in the minors, that's what's interesting about this particular deck. It does talk about the different swords, wands in larger chunks, not even bit by bit, but it points out some important, interesting notes. And then it talks about the cartomantic spread called the bridge. And so you have the span, the left bank, the right bank, and the person who crosses it. So it's a 4 card. So we'll take a look at that at the end as well. So while you don't get much information out of this for sure, it does at least address this particular deck and the artistic style and the artistic choices. And so for that, I actually prefer that, because I don't need just another little white book that's just going to say what does a basic 2 of swords mean. It's actually addressing how this is different. And so that is, you know, if you're only going to have 14 pages, I prefer that. Let's zoom in. I do have somebody who is continuing to move in, which means Isabel may go a little nuts, and I may have to pause this, but we'll see how far we can get. So here we have the Fool, which is actually, the title for this is, in older decks, is often to do with the madman. This is about madness. It's about being off the beaten path, being in a strange and very personal world it talks about. It also mentions how Vacchetta substituted a dog from the Marseille symbology with a feline cat, emphasizing the exotic and alien nature of the world of the Fool, where the realm that the madman dwells in is not the normal realm, right? So we don't have a dog, we actually have a cat. So that's pretty cool. Here we have the Magician. And so it has a single keyword, so madness for the Fool, ability for the Magician. This is very similar to Marseille style. It's more of that sort of charlatan or street performer than the magician that we know in modern decks. And so we can definitely see that in this. But you can see that the lines are gorgeous. I think that they did the repainting in a beautiful beautiful way. As they said, it's still, you can really pay attention to the original lines of Vacchetta. And so that, I just think it's just beautifully done. Here we have the Papessa. This would be the High Priestess. So we have here spiritual knowledge. We do have some little cherubs up here. The threshold isn't here, but the book we have, and it is not meant to be probably the Torah, but this would be more the Bible, because we definitely have the Christian iconography here. Here we have the Empress, who is very regal looking. I love her head wrap here. I think it's beautiful. And it does talk about in the Little White Book that the maternal aspect of the Empress is something that goes later. But she's actually the female power figure that goes with the Emperor. And so it talks about it being about the perceptive and receptive aspect of authority, versus the more outward representation of authority by the Emperor here. So I quite love that. And again, I just love her head wrap. That seems just quite different, right, than we normally would have seen. Of course, and I just talked about the Emperor. Where we can see, that's common that we'll see, as well as the ball. So we're seeing, but they're both holding. See, they're both holding the seats of their rulership. She's very much a ruler here, and that's quite powerful, I think. Here we have the Hierophant, which would be about faith. This is he's to be the go-between between the divine, right, and the material world, as the Pope would have done. We can see the keys in his hand, which we will later see kind of crossed in more modern decks very often. We see the staff, that's quite typical. We don't have the supplicants, which I actually quite like. I love this love card. So here we don't even have, and it's interesting because it actually has this as saying a sweet suffering. So how interesting is that? This is very different than Marseille style decks. It is not the lovers, it is love. And it says that Vacchetta gives in to the romanticism of the time with the inscription sweet suffering. He puts his trust in Cupid and doves in order to describe the feelings of affection and falling in love. So this is really less about the choices, right, of the Lovers card, and literally more about love. So I do love the blind Cupid here, but it's just beautifully done. But look at what's interesting is we have, here we have the two doves here. So quite beautiful. Here we have the Chariot, very similar, more to a throne. Many of the older style, as well as even the Rider-Waite-Smith chariots, kind of crack me up because they just feel like they're plonked there and they're not going anywhere. This a little bit looks more like a wheelchair, which I've seen in other decks as well, but it is apparently more neoclassical than Roman. And I want to say that is quite similar. Nope. The chariot in the neoclassical is much more with the horse is much more Roman, right? Feels much more Roman than that one. Just out of curiosity. I know I have decks that have this sort of wheelchair effect as well. But there we have the Chariot. Next we have Justice. Isn't she beautiful? I just love, because it just has the beautiful, like the neoclassical as well as the Soprafino. They just have such beautiful faces, and I just love it much more. We got to go with what appeals to us, and it appeals to me much more so than woodcut style Marseille decks. But I think she's so beautiful, but she also looks quite serious. So here we have Justice. She has the scales, she has the sword. It talks about with a sword, and scales refer to characteristics and prints of the French Revolution. Here we have the Hermit, which is actually entitled Research. So this is interesting because he is on his journey, but he's like at a little way station. He's kind of taking a break. He's got his little lantern here. He's reading for a moment. He's still on his journey, but he's taking a moment for reflection. I quite like that. Here we have the Fortune. The ancient name of this was the Wheel of Fortune, and there is some that are wheels and some that are fortune. This one is on the belly of somebody here. It talks about how when you have one that is focused on the wheel, it's focused on the cyclical nature of things, whereas some decks focus on the fortune, which this card does, which focuses on the idea of chance. I love this strength card. How beautiful is this? This is about courage, it says. It says, weight modified the order of the cards by inverting justice and strength because of astrological consideration. This deck, like the previous ones, follows the original numbering. Justice is, in any case, understood as earthly justice, and strength as moral strength. Not by chance, it is represented by a woman who subdues a lion, a symbol of bestiality and brutal force through her will. But look she's not even touching him. She kind of has her hand outward like, calm down, right? That's all she's doing. And I do love this kind of pillar that sometimes you'll see them holding. Some of the older historical decks, you'll see them actually holding this giant pillar. I think it's beautiful. Again, her face is that very serious, like, look, calm it down. It's just beautiful. It's a beautiful deck. Here, of course, we have the Hanged Man, which actually has the keyword of agony. This one puts on the agony of a Christian saint. So Catholics considered suffering a fundamental moment which may only be overcome through faith on the road to salvation. So we have a little bit more of the older, which was often sometimes a traitor that was being hung. And then we also, in this version, we have a saint that is kind of martyring himself, which gets a little bit closer, right, to the modern interpretation of sort of that Odin idea of sacrificing yourself for the good of others to gain new perspective, to bring new knowledge forward. I love that Death is wearing a hat with a feather in it. And I really do love death cards that actually have kind of worldly possessions, and you even see some religious possessions as well there. A skeleton reaps the symbols of power like a farmer harvests grain. It says, note the weapons, symbols of strength, the crowns and scepters, symbols of nobility, the tiaras, symbols of religious power. It's less showy, but in the foreground are the symbols of the arts and crafts, and opposite and it just shows that everybody is equal here. That death is the great equalizer, right? But I really love the hat. I'm sorry. I do. Look at how beautiful she is. So here, of course, we have temperance for moderation, a classic image where a young girl pours a liquid. Vacchetta has excellently rendered the twisting of the female body using the mastery he is known for. You know, the way that her body is turned. Apparently that is something that, and you see that in other cards as well, and apparently that is something that he is known for doing so well artistically, but it's just a beautiful card. Look at this devil. Do you not love this devil? This is an unusual image it talks about, where the Christian devil seated in the jaws of another demon. So he's sitting on a throne, but he's inside of a mouth. Consisting of combined parts of different animals, man and woman, the devil grips his own tail, a symbol of serpent with his peculiar three-figured hand. And look at the molars. Do you not just love the molars here? So it's quite interesting that you almost see that when you give in to the devil, when you give into giving over your power, you're just entering into another, you might think that you're doing something to free yourself or to, to live in the moment or whatever, but you're just putting yourself in another moment of slavery, so that the devil himself is inside the mouth of another. That could be never ending. So I think that's pretty cool, actually, and very unusual. Here we have the Tower, which is much more typical as we see. It's a destruction. There is definitely a punishment here going on for human arrogance, and actually a very impaled person here. So, you know, they're not just falling out of the tower. I don't think that person's getting up from this one. And this one's squashed by here. You know, you definitely have a destructive tower in this particular deck. No punches pulled on this one. Beautiful, beautiful star. This is about hope, but apparently the secondary meaning is about beauty, and it talks about Vacchetta wanting to create the idea that beauty feeds hope, and certainly we can see this here. Here we have La Luna, or the dream. Vacchetta, it says, proposes the neoclassical icon of Artemis and Diana the hunter, preserving the crab used in Marseille iconography while the dog is transferred into a hunting hound. So we do have the crab here, but this is much more that idea of Artemis and Diana, which with the bow, which is just beautiful. Here we have the sun for inspiration. It says we have Apollo here as the patron of the arts, which apparently was a concept very much loved by Vacchetta. And it talks about how the nearly mature grains, fruit of the earth, he emphasizes the creative power of the sun and light. I really think that's beautiful. I love the artfully placed blowing cape. And then we have Judgment, which is interesting because they call this card Joy. So this is interesting because, but Vacchetta does stay in accordance with the Marseille Tarot, and he starts with the first meaning of universal judgment, but then it also, the idea of divine glory, that this is actually in their best interest. But it's a beautiful, typical, fairly traditional judgment card. And then we have the beautiful world card. I think these are, the animals are done in a beautiful way. So we have this symbol of a naked woman. He talks about fertility, the cycle of life, the 4 symbols of the evangelists, which are the meaning of life. And apparently the scrolls have, there are 4, let's see, there's 1, there's 2 scrolls. Must be this writing up here as well, but it says it has the names of the seasons, so we get that idea of the cycles, and we can see this here with the changing of the vegetation in the wreath going around her as well. And that brings us to the wonderful minors, because we all love, and this is where this, in my opinion, this deck really stands out. Let me pull the aces as I like to do. Ace of Wands, Ace of Coins. You know, coins are actually, you know, I'm a swords person, but in pip style decks, I love to check out the pentacles. Look at that sword. How awesome is that? Can we get them all in? Yep, without zooming out. These are gorgeous aces. Interesting, we have a monkey here and a little child in the cup. We have this beautiful laurel wreath and these very interesting sword in a beautiful sheath here. We have coins, and we have a kind of Joker idea in the wands here. But they're just, it's just beautifully done. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful deck. I don't know how else to say it. Okay, let's go to our wands and our swords. Wait. I need to see how it does it. I take that back. Let's see how they do it so I can skim the book as we go. They have cups, and then swords, and then wands, and then coins. So I'm going to go that way just so I don't have to flip back and forth. Although, as I said, this particular little white book does not go to the individuals. It just points out some certain things that you might want to pay attention to. Okay, it does a great job of talking about how the chalices are very much representative of the container, and that you can really see throughout this particular deck the function of a container. They can take on being a glass, or being a vase, being an oil lamp, that they're meant to hold something. I quite love that. And so, yeah. Just wanted to point that out. I really, for a little white book that doesn't give you really anything about how to read them, so to speak, it does a beautiful job at showing you what's interesting about this particular deck, and I love that. So in this Two of Cups, this is basically his signature. It says Giovanni Vacchetta, painter, created these Naibi in Turin in the year 1893. So that's what that all says there. Here we have the three, a little guy holding, but you can see these are not, it's not a pip deck where we do have the 2 cups, but we actually have quite a lot going on in the actual background with actual human figures as well. Let's see, what was that? What we were on? That was the 3. So here we have the beautiful 4 of Cups. So she's got that on her head, you know, that kind of traditional. We have these 4 beautiful containers here, and we have her kind of balancing that on her head. Everything is in balance with their emotions, the stability of emotions. I don't know. I'm going to try not to get caught up. Here we have the 5, and it's interesting because no, it's a 6, because remember 5 is disruptive number. Now this talks about, the top of this says for the glory of the Lord, but when you get to the 6 of Cups, we have everything kind of balanced, and so it talks about their, I'm trying to see what it's talking about here. It says an incorrect perspective is made right with respect to an imaginary plane located at the middle of the card. So it's the idea of things coming back into balance, because if the 5s are about imbalance and the 6 is about harmony, this kind of rebalances them. And then we go through the rest. Here we have the 7 of Cups, the 8. So they are definitely still pip decks, but there's just a lot going on in the background that make them really unique to some other historical decks, which I think is really cool to take a look at. It talks about the court cards are Knave, Knight, Queen, and King. And so this suit is considered to be about nourishment. And so the page is kind of offering up a toast, whereas the knave talks about the knave and the knight, talking about the communicative. They're kind of like holding it up to offer a toast of some sort. The queen is actually cooking and providing the nourishment. And then the king, who is a vine grower, is offering up the toast apparently too. So it looks like the men are very toasty, making toasts, I suppose. But I love that the Queen of Cups here is cooking the food. I think that's really neat when you just kind of think about the idea of the Queen of Cups, the emotional nurturer, and she's kind of feeding people. Very neat. This brings us to the sword. So then here we have the swords, which of course are weapons, right? These are used as weapons, and also, interestingly, they were used as a symbol of nobility as well as civil law. And so the Ace of Swords actually says either I bring war, I love peace, or I love war, I bring peace. Apparently that's questionable what that actually says there. Then, of course, the laurel is the Roman triumph kind of feeling here. Look at this. This is where things I think it's so interesting. So here, Vacchetta is like the 2 that we had in the 2 of Cups. He is announcing himself, but he announces himself as a sculptor. So here, the Cups, he announced himself as a painter. Here he announces himself as a sculptor. So that's quite interesting. I also, love these tools that are here. You even have a brush here. And then if you look right here, these look like tarot card, like a plate with tarot cards on them. How awesome is that? Here we have the 3 of Swords. Beautiful. It's just beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful deck. Here in the Four of Swords, the Iron Glove and Helmet accompany all of these weapons. Whereas in the Five of Swords, they're kind of dropped down here, and it talks about them being in the dust. So that's quite interesting as well. Again, all different kinds of swords here. It's just a really, really beautifully drawn deck. Here we have the Six of Swords, again surrounded by the laurel leaf here. We have the Seven of Swords. Oh, it does talk about also all the tips coming together here. Showing a union with the fellow soldiers. So things are, again, that reharmonization, which I love. Here in the Sevens of Swords, we have some curved swords, more Arabic type swords that you sometimes see in some Marseille decks as well. Marseille style decks, I should say. Here we have the Eight of Swords. The Nine of Swords are actually piercing a heart, whereas in the Ten of Swords, they are kind of crossed, it talks about, as in a duel. So, you know, you normally see, obviously, the Three of Swords with the piercing of the heart, so that's quite an interesting, like, how would you kind of roll with that in terms of reading if you don't just take it pip style. But here, look at, again, all the different hilts, all the different sword lengths and type, even some in a sheath, beautifully done. So then it's interesting, another point to note here is that in the court cards, the swords are never brandished, but always held by the blade as a greeting or a sign of peace. So in the knave, we have a squire, he's kind of in a joust situation. And then we have the knight, who's an ambassador holding the sword away from his body to demonstrate his peaceful intentions. The queen appears as a Renaissance Judith, it says, who carries the chopped off head of the nude Holofernes. See how she's chopped his head off? And this is a story that is in the book of Judith, which is one of the books, obviously not in many of the traditional Bibles, but it is the book of Judith, and there are lots in the Renaissance. Apparently this was really popular, and Judith is a beautiful widow, and she is able to enter the enemy king's tent because he really desired her, and so then she of course wins the day by chopping his head off. So it really is used in a lot of paintings as sort of that idea of a female kind of taking power. So we have that going on there. And then we have obviously the king here. But again, they're all holding the sword. Even Judith, you know, she's already done her deed and chopped his head off, so now she's holding it by the blade and not by the hilt. As I said, you know, a very small little, 14 pages, but it really does serve well to giving sort of what's going on in this particular deck. And I really will take this any day over just giving me some quick little keyword for the card. So the guidebook talks about the wands being about the suit of life and masculine energy, and they really show up as tools in this suit in a way that I just absolutely love. So the scroll here, of course, we have the talking about Naibi Vacchetta in all of the twos. This adds his place of birth to the other ones that we already saw. Talking about being from Cuneo, C-U-N-E-O, and lists him also as a sculptor. The three, we have the oars and a trident near a monster, indicating the tie between man and the force of nature. So gorgeous. Here we have the four. Love that with the fruit. The five. The gorgeous six. Here in the Seven of Wands, we have various types of staff. This is my favorite. We have all different things. We have crutches, we have scepters, we have weapons, we have all kinds of things. And the scroll says, born from a single tree, but with different destinies. How awesome is that? All of these things that are doing different roles and tasks came from a single tree. I just love that. It's one of my favorite cards in the whole deck. In the 8, we have country tools, and we've got the harvest here, we've got a little sickle here, we've got the pitchfork, we have a shovel, and then we have a beautiful like organ for the 9, and it talks about it being a sweet sound, a dulce auditum. And then the court cards are that rural pastoral character. Look at the frog and the snails and the bugs all over. I love it. It's just very country, right? And so we have much more of a country figure here in the knave. The knight is actually dressed as a jester. The beautiful queen and the sheep and her bare feet. Do you not love that? And then we have the king here as well. And that leads us to the last suit of coins or denarii. So for the coins, which are also called pentacles now, are the suit of goods, possession, and earth. But for Vacchetta, he uses it also as the passing of time and history. Now, whereas the other ones have this signature on the 2, this one has it on the ace. But it's also interesting because he uses it for the stamp, the tax stamp. Which indicated the tax on the decks is peculiar. In this version, the stamp was preserved. Kingdom of Italy, 50 cents. Office of the Special Stamp, 16 September 1908. How awesome is that, Turin? In all of the minor arcana, each coin card is different from the other and actually has all of the Roman emperors in chronological order. The Roman coins always depicted the portraits of the emperors, which Vacchetta has accurately reproduced. So in the ace, we have Divus Augustus, whereas in the 2 of coins, we have Tiberius Caesar Augustus, Pontifex Maximus, and therefore Germanicus. So we have that going on here with the 2 of coins. In the 3 of coins, we have Nero, Otho, and Galba. And then and so on and so forth. You have all of the emperors of Rome in their chronological order. It says in the court cards, well, we'll get to that. So this, it just kind of goes through and has all of the emperors accurately, accurate portraits of them and their names in the chronological order that they ruled. So isn't that neat, though? I mean, every single coin is done differently and with purpose. I just think it's gorgeous, and all this beautiful kind of scroll work going on around them. And it talks about then in the court cards, we have the economic by showing here we have the knave who is actually gambling. The knight is said to be a merchant. And then the queen has a loom behind her. And again, you have that backward with the turning around, which you don't generally see. And then we actually have as the king, we have him depicted as a Jewish person with the winged hourglass here articulating the passing of time. So we kind of have a Jewish moneylender as the king of coins here. So there we have all of the cards. Again, I'm really impressed with this just in terms of the historical information that it gives us about this very unusual deck, and I think that's fantastic. Let me scroll out here. So it's just a beautiful, unusual deck, and I'm so glad that Lo Scarabeo brought it out. You can get this deck again with the original coloration, which is much more bold. From, I know of Il Menigalo, I don't know, there may be other places that you can get it as well. Just give it a couple shuffles here, and we'll just take a look at this bridge. I know that, you know, I took a little bit longer here because I wanted to point out, you know, what the beauty of this particular deck. Okay, so it looks like we are going to lay these down as 1 in the middle, 2 to the side, 3 to this side, and then the person walking over the bridge on the top. And so let's see what it says here. The bridge is in fact a metaphor for the link which is created in order to approach opinions, ideas, or people with opposing views, the two banks. Here's how the positions acquire a meaning. The number 1 is the span. This card represents the meeting point between two positions, the direction in which one must go in order to attempt to communicate with the opposite, what you're reconciling. I love that we have temperance, right, which is very much that sort of alchemy, that idea of balance as well. So there is, you have to approach this through balance in order to kind of come to a reconciliation. The left bank is the essential nature of the first idea or person, whatever it is that you're reading for. So this represents the point of view of the person for whom the cards are being read. The right bank indicates the essential nature or the second idea or person, preferably somebody else or a more impersonal point of view. So while the reader has this position of death, of understanding of the life cycle, things are changing, wanting change perhaps, wanting a new beginning, whereas the other person here, we have more of that stability because we have a number 4 of wands. So there is that more structural stable where perhaps the other person is really wanting something to change. And the way to meet is to find some balance between the change and the stability of the 4. Yeah, I'm just literally, we don't have a question, so I'm just throwing things out there, right? The 4 is the person that crosses it. A human presence indicates the desire to approach the ideas of people. The way in which things will be approached will be conditioned by the nature of this, which is the 3. And the 3 is about growth. Growth in water. So this is this, no, I'm sorry. I see water. See, you got to pay attention. Wands. So this is a 3 of wands. So we have that growth in passion, right? We have to approach, it's like we have to approach this idea of balance here with some passion. This has got to be, we've got to approach this not haphazardly, but in a passionate way, in a way in which we are ready to grow. We are ready to grow with this use of balance so that we can kind of pull these two separate points of view together. So this is just a spread that was put here, which is called the bridge. So I wanted to show it to you. I'm impressed with those 14 little pages in this. I'm not usually impressed, but in this case I am. Again, you wouldn't really probably pick this up and perhaps read with this because you would have to still know how to read with the cards, but it does an amazing job of highlighting the beauty of this deck. So I hope that you have enjoyed this look at the Lo Scarabeo version of the Naibi Vacchetta deck from 1893, which is called Tarot of the Masters. And again, this has been trimmed to take those bright green borders off and to put it down to what it originally looked like with the original titles. So there we go. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.